Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining the second session of our Enterprise UX Virtual Summit. We are here with Brian McLaughlin, who is the Chief Experience Officer at Bottomline Technologies, and his session is going to be diving a bit more into the tactics and the activities and the processes behind creating a design system in the enterprise at scale. And today's format will be Brian will present his slides, and then at the end we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A, which you can go ahead and type in your questions during the session into the Q&A box. All of the sessions will be recorded and sent to folks afterwards, so you don't have to worry about that at all. And without further ado, I'll kick this over to Brian, and we can go ahead and get started.
All right. Thanks, Jerry. Welcome, everyone. My name is Brian McLaughlin. I am, as you can read, and as Jerry mentioned, I'm the Chief Experience Officer at Bottomline Technologies. And today I'm going to talk about creating and scaling the enterprise design system. Hopefully, it is something you will have some nice takeaways from, and we'll just kind of go through both what I mean by creating and scaling it, but also I'm going to show you some specifics about what we actually did here at Bottomline Technologies. And hang on just a second. There we go. I'm having a slight delay. I think we'll probably be going a little smoother as we go along here. So the first question is probably, who the heck is Bottomline Technologies? We are the company that essentially what we do is we build business solutions that help companies pay and get paid. So all we do is focus on the payments. I know it sounds really sexy, but to that point, we actually have a number of offices around the globe. We're headquartered in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which is where I'm sitting. So everybody else in the Northeast, we enjoyed all the blizzard weather over the last couple of days, just like everybody else. And one of the things that's probably a little unique to us, besides the fact that we focus on business-to-business payments, is we have about 10,000 customers globally. We are a global company, as you saw from the previous slide, in our various locations. And what this means is our customers are banks and very large corporations. So when I mentioned that there's 10,000 customers, I'm not referring to the end users. We actually have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of end users. It's just that we have somewhere between 10 and 20,000 end customers that we sell to. We have about 1,700 employees. We're just under 1,700 at the moment. We've been winning quite a few awards over the last decade or so, and getting a lot of patents on some of our technology. And again, kind of going back into the scale and what we do around the business payments. And again, this is not so much a sales pitch for Bottomline, but I just want to kind of set up what we do. Is that around the business payments, last year we handled just under $1 trillion worth of payments put through our system. So even though you may or may not heard of us, there's actually a significant amount of currency that flows through our systems on a daily basis. At one time, we kind of did the math, and we figured it's around $32,000 per second goes through our systems. So with that in mind, this is certainly what makes us an enterprise company, right? So what we deal with is software that essentially is satisfying the organizations rather than individuals. Although as a UX group, we have to think about the individuals. So we'll get there in just a second. But just kind of a thanks to Wikipedia, and everybody contributes to that, at least so I can kind of ground the way I am considering enterprise as we go forward. It is very much the business-to-business part. But as a UX group, like I mentioned, we certainly focus and do a lot of work on the actual end user. So one of the things that's very common in the enterprise space is if you're in the enterprise space, this might look familiar. You have different lines of businesses within your company, and each line of business has different products, and sometimes they're shared and sometimes they're not. Now, this from a UX perspective is actually quite a challenge, because you're trying to kind of herd all these things and get everybody going in one direction. And from the outside, this would seem like kind of a mess from a business perspective. And again, this is not us being Bottomline. This is just typical enterprise. So before I was at Bottomline, the other place I was in which again there were large large enterprise organizations, this is a pretty typical setup, right? And you as an individual might be sitting in one product line in one line of business that is only part of a very large organizational enterprise of business processes. So with that in mind, we'll go back to the year 2011. So in 2011, we were a pretty typical company. I was hired in 2011. And before I got here, essentially, user experience was handled by whoever it was that happened to pick up that ball. And generally, the hippo effect was going in place. For those unfamiliar with that little acronym, it stands for the highest paid person, right? So essentially, whoever it was making the most money had the biggest opinion, and therefore that's what happened, right? It wasn't really based on research or testing or anything else. And then from a just organizationally, each one of the different lines of businesses had their own leads, and these were not UX people; they're product people, development people, et cetera, were making these decisions. So there was very little documentation, if any, around from a UI perspective. Very much a lack of communication between products, at least from a UX perspective, right? There is plenty of communication from the business perspective, et cetera, but this is, through the UX lens, and again, this is typical, is there was no discussions. Basically, it was the Wild West kind of going on, right? And besides the fact that how these things were done, it could have been sketches on paper, it could have been somebody that's really handy with Excel, believe it or not. I solved some of that. So it was interesting, but not particularly useful in helping us grow. So here's an example of actually one of our products, and this is circa 2011. So what I'll do is I'll pretend, I'm on a PowerPoint, so I'm going to pretend to scroll down. And this was a screenshot of a real live product, although all the data in here has been scrubbed enough that it's not useful for anybody that happens to be looking at it from that perspective. So I'm going to keep scrolling down. And I'm still scrolling down, and I'm still scrolling down. I'm still scrolling down. Oh, look, I got to the bottom of the page, and oh, that's nice. This is page 1 of 4, right? So obviously, when I arrived and started building the team, there was a lot of work to do. Now, on the other side of this, right, this was a really successful product. This product was generating huge amounts of revenue, a lot of income for the company. So it's not as though this was looked at as, this is a big impedance for the company moving forward. This was a very successful product. And it was, and what you just saw there was typical. You would then go to another page that had another huge table of information, and you would scour your way through it. But people liked it. It helped businesses. Well, I shouldn't say people liked it. The business owners liked it, both not just from our company, but the companies that were purchasing this. It solved a business need for them. And it actually did quite well, and there was little to no competition to that product. That product is, if you happen to see the headline or the header there, it's called PayModeX. And PayModeX today has about 360,000 companies on it. It's a payment network. So again, highly successful. So between the years 2011 and 2016, we started making some changes. So the team grew by 50. So right now we're a team of right about 56 people globally, and that's all happened in the last 5 years. It's a multidisciplinary team. So we have UX researchers, UX designers, visual designers, UI development sits under this group. Mobile, so all the mobile research, design, and development sits within this group, as well as creative teams and some other things that we do. The design system that we built is roughly 2 years old, and I'll start showing you kind of how we got there in just a second. And this team, even in the 5 years that we have been together, in the last probably 2 or 3 years, once this design system was put in place, we had some other processes put in place, we started winning awards, which has been quite meaningful both to the team but also as a company. So how did we get there? So there's executive support, there's executive presence, there's really good work, there's punching above our weight. The way we refer to that internally is we're not a really large team in the scheme of companies and size of the company and the amount of volume of work that gets done, et cetera. So it does require that everybody does, quote unquote, punch above their weight. And the team is unified, which is another thing that's been really helpful. You know, as you saw from my previous screen with all the different bubbles all over the place, we have a convergence and global presence that we layer over everything, even though we have individuals working on different products. And again, I'll talk more about that in a second. And we've seen there's been visible revenue increase. So everybody from the CEO on through all the different general managers of all lines of business, they get it. They see the results, they understand where we are in the market compared to where we were before. So it's worked quite well. Now, these are all great, and I'll be perfectly honest, these are things that you probably would expect to hear at a conference, and I think there are probably some speakers going on over the day and over tomorrow that do a much better job than I will right now of spending time on how you do each one of those things. Instead, I want to focus on the one thing, like what was unusual that we did that got this in place? Because like I mentioned, all the executive support and the good work and building the teams is all great. But for the sake of today, it's like, how do you scale the effort to get to that level, to continue with a level of quality that just can impact the business in a more holistic way? And I'm not going to talk about scaling in terms of what it means to end users and bulk actions versus how you deal with large data and those types of things. It's more about just process and how you get the teams and scale it as a group. So for the enterprise, it's all about the scale, right? This isn't a matter of a smaller startup where there's maybe 10 or 20 people in it, which you're all kind of sitting in the same place. I mean, we're a globally distributed company. There are people that work at home. There's people in different countries. So we've had to figure out a way to make this kind of round together. So here's the biggest piece that we put into place. We referred to it as getting to one. And what this screen represents is essentially you can have everybody has come up with their own date picker. Everybody's come up with their own way to download something. Everybody's come up with a different way to graph information, different grids and data sets, and how it works in mobile. And there's just a plethora of different solutions to meet each one of these. And we said, so when I was building the team, essentially what we did is I said, enough. So there's going to be one of each one of these. So we have to figure out how to get to one date picker, one way to download, one way to upload a file, one data grid, one way to do forms, one navigation structure, how you manage widgets on a page, all that stuff. We had to get down to the point where we have one of these things. Part of the way that I sold this internally was not only does it bring uniformity to our product line across the table. Again, if you think back to that crazy bubble slide with all the different lines of businesses and products, you can't integrate the products if you have a disparate kind of toolbox, right? Or just tools all over the place. It just doesn't work. So this was the beginning of the journey, and this started about 4 years ago, out of the past 5 or 6 years. So the first thing we did is we put in place what we call the convergence team. So this is how we got to one, right? So this is how we got to our design system, and this is how we ended up putting into practice the philosophy of get to one. So the conversion team, and I'll go into these in more details, essentially they're responsible for the visual design, the prototype work, the specifications, and what we call glue. So glue is actually our pet name for our internal design system. So from here out, you might keep hearing this phrase glue. That's our clever and cute name that we tagged our design system. So the convergence theme, so just to kind of again go back to, so we're all working off the same definition, is that convergence or the merging of distinct technologies, industries, or devices into a unified whole. It was all about that. Let's just get unified. So when you think about all these different groups and all these things, this was not the easiest task, but it was actually the most important task. And the one thing that I can kind of pass on is that people very quickly start focusing on the wrong things. It's very common that people start looking at, well, what tool are we going to use, and what library is going to be, and which date picker, and so forth. That wasn't the beginning. The beginning was actually, let's just culturally agree this is where we're going to go, and let's get everything behind that. right? So it really wasn't about what tool at first. We got to that later. So to that point, right, here's what the convergence team does. So before I cover all these bullet points, I just want to kind of, again, reiterate the fact that there were some secrets behind this. The first one was a smaller group needed to own this. So, we didn't spring up as a team of 50 plus people overnight. It did take time. So what we did is we put together a governance group, and the governance group had representation of UI development, interactive design, and visual design, and research. And in some cases, that's the same person that handles a couple of those. Excuse me. And it required this small group so we could have a more honest conversation. One of the things that we often say inside Bottom Line is the smaller the group, the more honest the conversation has to be. So, if I'm delivering some kind of message to the entire company, it's more general. Whereas if it's a senior leadership team and we're sitting together, it's like, okay, what's working, what's not working. So anyway, the smaller group lends itself to that. Non-product design people need to be involved with this. So even though the governance team is made up of UX professionals, we included other product people, development people, business people, et cetera, as we were forming this to get their insight into their perspective. So again, if you think about doing usability tests or UX research or anything else, it's all about, hey, you're not the end user, so let's go figure it out. When you're putting this together, you have to think the same way, right? It's like, okay, well, you're not the person that's doing the deployment of the application. So there might be something we do that messes up his life. So we have to kind of figure that out. And the other one that I would highlight is not everybody got a vote. And this is one of these things that it seems harsh to say, but it actually is really important. And that is, as the group got bigger, everybody had a voice, and everybody included their own, this is where I think we should go. And that was really important. But at the end of the day, not everybody got a vote. And that was just simply because otherwise it just gets bogged down. There really needs to be who's the owner, who's responsible, and let's move this forward. So anyway, I'm sure you've read all the bullet points at this point, so I'm not going to read through each one. Although I will stop on the couple there under culture. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less, right? So again, clever little quote, but it's something that we use quite a bit, because whenever you're doing from a design perspective, bringing people together and trying to formalize this is the one piece of interactive behavior, it really does kind of take the right people to be able to kind of say, yeah, I get it. I may not completely agree, but I'm good. So let's move on. So it wasn't really a matter of, not having strong-willed people, because we certainly have some strong-willed people, but it was just getting everybody to kind of get behind the same goal, right? All right, so the last slide on that. So process, again, establishing a baseline for the framework, the design and the approval. So again, that went back to a lot of people contributing, but not everybody having the final vote, and consistency and maintenance. So that governance group was very much looking over the consistency and the maintenance of this, because it's as hard as it is to get this going. It actually continues to be a nice challenge, a good problem to have in terms of, well, wait, a design just came in and that doesn't match something else we've done, or there could be some interactive principle that somehow got broken by something coming in. So we certainly have to look at that. And then the last bullet point of finite details are needed, but they're not the goal. This is another one of these. You'll find individuals or groups of people that sometimes they want to talk about the weeds all the time, and we need that. We absolutely need that. But sometimes it does take the group to say, well, wait a minute, we haven't figured out the whole thing yet, so let's not worry about that too much just yet. So I won't dwell on that too much. So where we went with that, once we had the convergence team in place and they were going quite well, we started having some of the designs come out of things. This is where the tools came in. Again, I kept the team away from the tools discussion. Because I just didn't want it to become about the tools. I wanted it to become about, the output output? Where are we going? What's going to be our global experience? So then when it did come time into, okay, well, how are we going to do this? We, like many shops, we were a Adobe focused heavy shop. And that was mostly because of the original people in the Convergence team were very fluent in Adobe products. Photoshop, Illustrator, the norms, right? Well, one of the things that we found is that's great, but the interactions were hard to communicate. And then this is when we started looking at different productivity tools and design tools, and UXPin started rising up. So out of all the ones that we looked at, UXPin was the winner. So what we started doing is we started looking at it from the perspective of, okay, now the Convergence team is up and running, and yes, we have some basic designs down. We need some interactive principles, and we need a way to demonstrate and communicate that at scale. Again, everything's at scale. So that's where UXPin really started helping us. The other thing that it did is that as we started growing the team, a lot of, well, I shouldn't say a lot, some of the newer members of the team weren't as fluent in Adobe, the Adobe suite, and UXPin, if they hadn't used UXPin before, they probably used something similar, and they caught on to UXPin very quickly. And I can kind of show you how we have actually built our UXPin environment out. And then we use UXPin for all the prototyping work, as well as all of the testing. So we do a lot of mobile and desktop testing using the UXPin prototype capabilities. And then it gets into the documentation, right? So we're all going towards to get this thing live. So then we started doing all the documentation. Primarily, it's all done in UXPin now. We use the Atlassian suite. We're an Agile shop here, so we use Jira and Confluence and all the various pieces of the Atlassian suite. So we actually have links between UXPin and Atlassian. So that way, in an epic, in a story, in a sprint, you can refer back to interactive prototypes within the story because we link it back into UXPin. And then we actually have the glue development part, right? So, and I'll show you that system in just a second. The adoption rate of our internal design system at this point is near 100%. The only reason it's not 100%, and I'll have to, I'll be honest with all you guys, don't tell my team who's outside my office right now, it will never be 100%, simply because we have some legacy products that we're not going to move over into the new technology. So with that said, so visual design. So what we did, so each one of those stages, so visual design, essentially, get the basic requirements out, establish the baseline, and eliminate the design churn that can happen. In early, like I mentioned, early days, this was all Photoshop. Then we started using UXPin as part of the design tool, not just the prototyping tool. So once we migrated everything over and we got more skilled with UXPin capabilities, now almost everything is done in Photoshop. And essentially, there's a smaller group that oversees any of the visual design aspects. Again, it goes back to the whole, you can't have 50 people trying to make a decision about an aesthetic component, right? So what I did is we carved off a team as both voluntary and involuntary of who got carved off and is part of that smaller group that makes some of those decisions. So actually, so I can show you really quick. I mentioned Photoshop. So this is what the original Photoshop document looked like. As you can see, there's all the different actions, and as UX professionals on the call, I'm sure you'll be able to pick out some of this stuff. But messaging, alerts, and notifications, form elements, form element layouts, how you manipulate grids and do filtering, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a pretty extensive document. I'll zoom out just real quick, right? So it's a pretty extensive document that pretty well covered everything, color palettes. I think I mentioned that part of our global group are all the creative teams. So we control all the look and feel and all the interaction of every aspect of the company outside of product development as well. So this was, it was also very helpful to have that in place so that as we do things like colors and branding for the company and branding for the products, it's all done under one umbrella. So the prototype work. So as we get into the prototype work, this is, this is a shot, a screenshot of our UX pin setup, and I'll show you that in just a second. But essentially, it's a team library. So it has a repository, and there's various approved components in it. So nothing shows up in the reusable UX pin asset library until it's been approved by that governance group. Everything's high fidelity. They're all branded correctly. Usability tests, like everything has been done against these components before they show up in the library. Once they show up in the library, into the UX pin aspect of the library, they've been vetted and tested and vetted and tested. And then also the annotations for the documentation have also been put in place. So essentially, I won't spend a lot of time showing you, but I can show you really quick. So let's see, let's pull something out here. All right, so here's our widget library. So I can just pull it right out of UX pin. It's already been pre-designed. It's not positioned very well, but you get the point. So this is what one of our interaction grids look like. So full page widgets, half page widgets, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all pre-configured components. If I didn't want that, I can bring in, what else do we have sitting in here? Right, so we have some form pieces as far as a 2-column element. So we have all these things already pre-configured and sitting in UX pin. The other thing, as I mentioned, our research. So our research is all in here too. So we've documented and categorized and cataloged all the research that we do. So we have all kinds of studies around people interacting with widgets, adding a widget, removing a widget, managing a widget, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all things that we keep track of as well. So again, it's all part of that scaling process, because if one group goes off and does it and they don't tell anybody, it can't scale, right? So it's all about go do something, get it in place, prove it, and then bring that proof back and then share it with the group. So that convergence group that I mentioned, they meet every Thursday. So they meet every Thursday at, I believe it's 10 o'clock now. Actually, I stay out of that meeting so that it can move forward more quickly. So those guys meet every week. So every week they're sharing, hey, this is something we learned in the field. Hey, this is something we learned through usability testing. Here's another, here's another design for approval, or I'm in early stages, let me get some feedback. So that happens every week. Everybody, all the designers are on that call, as well as select UI developers are on that call. Specifications, everybody's fun topic, right? Nobody really wants to do this, but again, it goes back to scale. If you can't document what you're doing, then it's really hard to control the quality of the products overall. And if you can't control the quality, then your scale is starting to fall down, right? You're really not getting what you need out of it. So if I jump over to, so this, if you guys can see this, what this is this is a checklist of components. So essentially what happens is, the buttons, we'll pick an easy one, right? So the buttons, what stage are they in? Well, the design's been finalized, it's available in UX pin, there's documentation, and it was QA'd by Scott, right? So we keep track of all the objects or the elements that could possibly end up in the library, so we understand what stage they're in. So you can see a couple of things that are not available in UX pin at the moment, but this is how we track all that. Again, because as you think about scale, either people or stuff, right? You need some way to track all this, or else it's really easy to get lost and either, just we've lost track of what we've had, or, which then kind of deviates from there will be ones. Like, oh yeah, I didn't realize we already had buttons in there. So somebody goes off and designs another one, builds another one, and tries to put it in the library, and then we have problems. This is some of our other documentation. Again, this is all in UX pin. And it's actually interactive documentation, which we really like to do for our development groups, so that they can get a sense of not just this is what it looks like, but this is how it feels. Like, this is what the behavior is going to be. Like if I click on the drop down, what do the rollover states look like? Is there a division between what's currently displayed and what's not currently displayed, and how's that handled? And these are all documented in UX Pin because it helps us, like I said, it's a more interactive documentation process, which has been very helpful not only in the development stage but also the QA stage, because we've used this with our QA people so that they understand this is the expected outcome. Because as you know, from a QA perspective, a lot of times you're looking at it as, did the system work? Not necessarily, was the interaction of the system the way it was intended to be? Oh, so the last point about you can only spec so much. We don't want to be, well, I should say it this way. I don't want the designers to spend 80% of their time writing documentation. So again, that's where it goes back to those interactive specs. As long as we keep them up to date and we keep them centralized, it works really well. And we just simply know we're not going to be able to spec too much. I've seen some fantastic ways to communicate, things like, a collapsed pane opens at medium speed. Well, what the heck is medium speed? Well, until you actually have people trained up, it's hard to communicate that, and we don't try to spec that. What we do is it's embedded in the library, and as long as nobody messes with it, it works. So the communication between the UX design group and the UI development group is really tight. Again, they're orchestrated in a way, they sit together, they report in the same structure up into the global UX group. And then that way, it's just, everything is a lot more in sync. And again, back to the scaling thing, right? It's all about scale. So I mentioned Glue, that's our kind of pet name for our internal design system. So I can show it to you really quick. So this is what it looks like. So this is an internal system. It's not accessible from the outside world. You have to be inside of our firewalls in order to get to it. And essentially, we built the platform out of the platform, if that makes sense. So, if you click into the catalog, essentially we have all the different aspects. So there's the grid. There's the grid with bulk action capabilities, right? So I get the bulk action. There's a JavaScript that makes it work. There's markup that makes it work. So each one of these things, it comes with the, this is what it is, this is how the behavior works, and here is the code that makes it work, right? So you can drag them around, so all these things are there. So the idea is that when a development group is working with this library, they can just pull the piece, put it in. And we actually do things like nobody except for a UI developer can touch the style sheeting. Nobody except for a UI developer can change the markup, so that we have that kind of consistency. Because this is a product. So as we roll this product or library into our other products, if somebody changes it, they're now off the core part. So there's a UI development management effort that goes with that. File upload. So again, it's all fairly straightforward things, but it shows you the HTML, and we actually don't display the style sheeting because the idea is take this HTML, put it into your system, and provided you have the rest of the aspects of Glue, it will work. You don't have to worry about the spacing. You don't have to worry about any of that. Which is another interesting part that we had to work out is the documentation that shows things like how many pixels one element is from another only exists for the UI development team to make Glue. Once you pick up Glue, then nobody should be looking at that because the spacing comes with it. So as you put one form element to another, it just magically works. So that's how we manage that aspect of it. So at this point, Glue is highly recognized as an internal brand to the point where I do a fair amount of sales calls with the sales team. I had to stop them from using that phrase during sales meetings because, as you might imagine, our customers look pretty perplexed. So, if we're sitting with C-level executives at some significant global bank and the sales guy is talking about Glue, everybody's kind of looking at each other like, what is this guy talking about? So it's been a very interesting success story in terms of its adoption rate is really, really high, but we've also had to educate people internally of, this is an internal tool. So, don't go talking about it like it's externally known. It just isn't. So anyway, again, you will have read most of these bullet points. Just to stop on a couple, the system out of the box is AA compliant. So all the elements are. Now, where you can mess this up is just because all the pieces are compliant, you can put it together in a non-compliant way, which again is each of the groups has a UI lead, both from a development perspective and design perspective. What I mean by group is each one of the products has a dedicated team associated with it, and they look after these things. So they look after using Glue correctly and et cetera. Also, though, the last point, as I mentioned before, we deal with a lot of very large customers. Many of our products are white labeled, so they actually have to look like that customer. So if we sell our product to a bank, it looks like the bank. Bottom line's never seen, right? It just looks like whatever the bank is. So just a couple of overall takeaways. So establish the base framework, right? So this is the obvious thing, right? Just, where are you going? What are you trying to get done? This is where the "there will be one" came from. That's the baseline framework. Make sure there's a governance group in place. Somebody has to own this. So from a UI development perspective, there is an owner of the Glue library. And that owner has a governance group that sits with them. We have never had the owner have to break a tie or anything else, because in general, they just work together well. It's a non-issue. Same thing with the design side. So the initial, hey, what are you going to make? There is there's actually a partnership between two guys that own this, and then everybody contributes to it. Foster judicious and collaborative design culture. This is, any kind of large effort. It really does take designers to work together. And sometimes that works great, and sometimes it doesn't. And as a company, and the way we put our teams together, we just make sure that everybody can have a very strong voice, but also at the end of the day, we have to get a single piece out. So that's something that we work on all the time. Company awareness of the design system. We've done when this first started coming to fruition, we did a pretty strong, I won't really want to say marketing campaign, but we worked with everybody in the company to make sure we're on track and we got buy-in. And that was a significant part. Now, obviously it helps because we have executive presence around this, but just the same, it was more about making sure that everybody understood the value, and then that's what really drove a lot of the adoption of the system. Globalizing the design tool set. This becomes non-achievable if we have different people using different tools, because you can't pass the pieces around. And some of you, I'm sure, have been in teams over time where one person loves Illustrator, hates Photoshop, and then you have a guy that really loves Photoshop, hates Illustrator. And yes, Adobe's done some great strides to get those to play nice together, but the simple fact is they only play so nice together. And that's where UXPin has really come to the forefront for us, that we can just integrate ultimately everything into that tool set, and that's the one tool set. The single design system across the company, one of the things, and I don't think I mentioned this before, is again, going back to that bubble slide with all the different products and lines of business and everything else. Each one of those lines of business and each one of those products truly believes that what they're doing is unique. Well, as a company in which everything we do are different flavors of business-to-business payments, from my chair, there's a lot of things that from an interactive principle, I'm not saying from a business principle, but from an interaction principle, it's kind of the same. A date picker is a date picker. We just need to make sure it handles all the different ways that we do. Like we have some unusual aspects to our date picker, like select last 7 available days, but it's not just weekdays, it's days in which payments could be made, or select the last quarter, financial quarter, or things like that. But end of the day, across all of our companies, there are many similarities, and that's certainly one of them. Is we look for more the similarities more than what the differences are. And the last one about constant review and maintenance. this is no small task. This is not a, hey, it's made and now let's move on to something else. This is a constant thing, that we have to keep on top of and make sure everybody's going the right direction and is understanding where we're trying to go. And it's been quite successful. But again, it took a couple of years, and it took several very dedicated people to work on it. So the result, I'm just going to show you something really quick. This product right here, if you remember that slide from a while back where it was just this humongous table of data, this is that same product now today, right? There's very few tables. It's all about interactive filtering, drilling into things that you want to see. So there's the new table, but by the time you get to this, it's a couple of rows, not a couple of thousand rows, right? So we have all kinds of new pieces and interactive principles in here. So as if you can recall back, whatever it was 30 minutes ago when I showed those slides of just, row after row after row after row, which, from an end user perspective was unbelievably difficult to entertain even how to get anything out of it. This is what the new product looks like, and it's much more productive, and it's gone quite well. So with that, I think we're at the mark where we can probably start taking some questions, Jerry.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brian. That was a great sort of coverage of how your design system works and the different nuts and bolts that are involved in putting that all together. We've got some great questions here from folks. And before we actually get into the questions, I do want to just clarify that the sessions will be sent to anybody who registers. And so, of course, all the recordings and all that good stuff will be sent afterwards to folks. Yeah, let's get right into the questions. So obviously we won't be able to get to all of the questions, but we'll try to get through as many as we can within the next 15 minutes or so. So I'm going to try to go through themes of questions. And one theme of question has been around sort of creating this this source of truth, right? This source of sort of getting to one. And so we're curious here, was there in the beginning, was there a sort of inventory process or auditing process that the convergence team had to get through to first capture and catalog all the UI variations, just to get a feel for that landscape? And if there was, could you kind of explain that process?
Sure. So the short answer is yes. Yes, there absolutely was an audit that we did. And again, I kind of relate that back to one of the last things I had mentioned about there is more in common than there are differences in systems. Now, my team will certainly support or verify the fact that I will tend to oversimplify things. So in a way, I'm trying not to oversimplify too much here. But what we did is we looked across the board and we just decided as a company, one of the things that we do, and this, again, oversimplifying it, is data in, data out, right? Anything related to payments, it's, well, who are you trying to pay? When are you trying to pay them? You want to see historical data about what's happened previously, et cetera. So essentially it's data in, data out, and can I see that data? So to me, that came down to, there's forms. Well, forms consist of inputs. Well, what kind of inputs are there? So we kind of went through and inventoried all of those. And then it was also what we call a grid. Some people call it tables, some people call it interactive tables, whatever the term it is that you can relate to, which is essentially show me a ton of data at one time. And sometimes that data you need to take action against, sometimes you just need to read it, sometimes you need more detail. So again, coming back to the data in, it's all about forms and every different input type, date pickers, time selections, et cetera. And then let me see the results of that. And then, so when we did that, we boiled it down to, okay, here are all the form elements, here's a grid. That got us a significant proportion of the overall applications. And that's not to say about, yes, we all have menus, yes, we all have to log in, those types of things, but the majority of the content of the screens were about those two things. Now, one of the things we then put on top of it were the data visualizations. And as you might have caught from the last screen that I showed you, the data visualizations are not just to look at, they're actually interactive components that are acting as filtering pieces. Because it goes back to, okay, here's all the data I have, and then the next action that is the most common across all of our software is, help me find the one thing I'm looking for. So even though I have made 45,000 payments this last month, I need to find these two, right? So it became that type of thing. So yes, there's an inventory, and what we did is we broke it down into those gross buckets. You know, what are the common things that every one of our application does? The data in, the form, the data out, and that was kind of the, you know, show me the details and show me the results in these grids or detail pages.
Right, and Jason here actually has a related question, and this has come up a few times with people trying to understand in the early stages of creating this design system, what helped sort of non-design stakeholders sort of understand and get on board with having this design system drive the products. So whether that meant getting the right resources to build this, or just getting the right buy-in to implement this as a process. What did that look like for you? Were they pretty receptive from the beginning, or was there quite a bit of sort of education and evangelism into why this this design system was necessary?
Yeah, I'll actually answer that in a I don't want to say roundabout way, but you know, so one of the luxuries I had here at Bottom Line is so I've been around for a while. So I've been into a lot of different companies in which you just had to battle as to why there's any value to doing what we do. I had promised myself and my wife at a certain point in my career, I'm only going to work for companies in which I don't have to battle that hard. So I was fortunate, and Bottom Line was very receptive to my coming on board and doing this. Now that's all well and nice. The CEO knew it. He didn't have a problem with it. But there was another, at least at that time, there was another 1,000 other people that didn't really understand. So we spent a lot of time on education about why UX matters, you know, those types of things. But the strongest, most compelling way that I've ever sold any of this is proof. So we had a product, I won't get into the details, but essentially we had a product in which it took 20 minutes to start your day. So what that meant were things like, I have to come in, this is a piece of software in which essentially people are on it 8 hours a day. So they would come in, they would log on, they would run a report, they print out the report, they take a highlighter, highlight the pieces on the pieces of the elements on the paper that they wanted to work on first, and then they get to work. That took roughly 20 minutes. The way we found that out is we went and researched it. We sat by people that were doing this type of work. We studied it, we timed it, we did everything. So then we went away and we changed that one piece of workflow, and it went from taking 20 minutes to under 2 seconds. That particular product, we earned money by transactions per day, per week, per month, etc. So we just saved 20 minutes a day, which translated at the end of the week, it actually translated into $100,000 more processed within a week. So there was very easy, in this case, it was very easy to tie back revenue gains to UX work. So what I would suggest is that wherever you are, you have to figure out a business case for this. So this is one of the things that I see designers miss the most, is you have to tie it back to business. So in every one of our products, we did that. We just kind of seeded it a little bit and just said, look what we can do. And then from a performance standpoint, I'm not sure if you guys are seeing this quick poll, so I'm just going to move it out of the way. So from a performance standpoint, what we looked at were things like, from a UI developer perspective is, okay, the screen was taking 20 seconds to load. It now takes less than 1. And that's with using the new library, you get more performing, higher performing screens. We would run through the gamut. It now works in mobile. It's one library that works on both. We would just go through it and through it and through it and through it. It took a while, and essentially what we did is, the team now, which is 50 plus, it took a while to get there, and what we do is each place we go, we prove it out. Okay, let's find a use case that we can make a business case around it, prove it, And sometimes it's like, whoa, that didn't have the results we wanted. But I can tell you that if you walk into a place that looks like the screens that I showed you at the beginning, it will be not too hard to find a business case of how to make that improvement. And then also in the markets today, the markets, even in the, I mean, we deal with banks, hospitals, insurance companies, right? These are not fast movers. But even they get the fact of you have to do something new or you're going to get left behind. So there's a series of tactics that we use, but the biggest one was, show me the money, right? Is if we're going to pay X amount to hire X amount of designers and UI developers, what do I get out of it? And you've got to prove that to me, and that's what we do. And we prove it on a regular basis.
Right. And before we get into the next question, I just wanted to clarify that the poll we just launched is to just make sure that we keep the content accurate for the audience that we have at all of our webinars here. And I will end the poll here shortly, probably like another minute or two here as people start adding their responses. The next question that we'll take here actually is about consistency and sort of multi-device design with Glue. So some folks here are curious about how this design system works across mobile to desktop. So for instance, how do you ensure consistency across platforms while you still stay true to the design system? Obviously, Android has strict material guidelines, and how might you account for these different platforms and sort of their specific nuances while you still stay true to your, the principles in your design system?
Yeah, this is a challenge, right? I mean, a well-known challenge. So, great question. The approach we took. Well, let me back up. First, it's a matter of, understanding who's really going to use your system on mobile. The complexity of what we do and the people in which use our systems, we spent a lot of time making sure we very strongly understood that. And this is really important, right? Because in a way, it gets really distracting, if you will, about looking at material design, the iOS human guidelines, and natural browser reactions, and hybrid apps versus native apps, and all these things. So what we did is we took a different approach and decided, well, regardless of all that, who uses our systems? How do they use them? When do they use them? Where do they use them? So it became much more about context and people. So for example, our banking application. Our banking application is, if you work for a large company, essentially, there's somewhere in your company, you have a finance group, and it could be 2 people, it could be 2,000 people, and they log on to bank systems, and then they transfer money, they make payments, yada, yada, yada. So when we sort of, to keep using that for an example, is if you talk to a accounts payment clerk, they don't do anything on their phone, right? So work related, let me qualify. They do all kinds of things on their phone, but they're not walking across the street to go get lunch while they're still transferring money. They just don't do that. Essentially, if they're not at their desk, they're not doing their work. And that's okay. I mean, that's a very strong, compelling use case. So as we kind of work our way up the food chain, if you will, you get to I don't know, the senior vice president of finance, he's probably going to use his phone to do something. But it's going to be more like, hey, Bob locked himself out again. I need to reset his password. Or, hey, I need to approve this payment. So in this case, that person doesn't really care about material design, human guidelines from iOS, and the Apple guys. They don't care about all that. They just need interaction principles that are consistent with what they know. And if they're using the desktop version and they see it on mobile, any kind of consistency to them trumps, hey, this didn't act like a Android native application. And again, I'm not speaking about mobile globally. I'm just talking about our applications with the users and what they're using them for. It's more important about consistency of the design in which they've gotten used to on the desktop, and who they are and what they're trying to do, rather than trying to get some of these other influences in. I'm sure the designers at Google and Apple probably wouldn't like my answer there, but again, it's more realistic around who we're doing business with. So it has become less about the device and the design and more about productivity with their tools and what they're accustomed to.
Right. And speaking of Glue, we also have some questions just around sort of the infrastructure and rollout of Glue. So this is sort of a two-part question. The first part should be pretty quick to answer, which is people are just wondering what framework Glue is sitting on, if it kind of looks like Bootstrap, but they just want to confirm that. And then the second part of that question is how was Glue rolled out? Was it sort of incrementally, or was it just all at once you guys implemented it?
So as far as what Glue is built on, it's actually a Backbone Marionette based. So it goes pretty deep from an architectural perspective. So if you think about, well, and it does include Bootstrap. So yes, Bootstrap is part of it, because the primary reason we're using Bootstrap, to be honest, is so we didn't have to redo all the layout grids. So anyway, it has Bootstrap in it, it has jQuery in it, it's based on Backbone Marionette. So as Bootstrap is to kind of aesthetic CSS and some of the markup, Backbone and Marionette is our rendering, kind of for those that are really technical, it's our one-page JavaScript application framework that sits there, and that's how the templating systems work. So yes, we certainly leverage third parties. The other part that we did when we started it from a UI architecture perspective is my mandate there was everything goes out of fashion. So we need to be able to pull something out and put something in. So for example, we have to update to the latest version of jQuery, pulling the old version out or putting the new one in, depending how you want to look at it, is a pretty seamless experience for us. And then we just have to get all the products to update, and we're pretty good. So anyway, yes, we didn't invent everything. So that was certainly part of it. As far as the Glue rollout, we did this, we have kind of an internal thing that basically says, you'll love the Dr. Seuss kind of things. Anything new is built in Glue, right? So we actually don't have bumper stickers for that, though we have t-shirts made for some other things. And what it means is any new product that starts has to start with this library. And any legacy product, what we did is we sat down with the owners of that product and drew up a transition schedule of how to get off of the old architecture and onto the new architecture. And a lot of that was based on the fact of, hey, you have to update these screens anyway. And regardless of the UI or the UX, it's just there might be outdated security protocols in it, or like there generally is some compelling reason that something has to change in the product. And essentially what we do is we say, look, if you're gonna have to change it anyway, then if it's new, it's gonna be in this format. And that was, so we've kind of gone at it from two different angles. One, if it's brand new, then you start with this. And if it's legacy, don't build anything new with the old legacy components. Now, the other part is I didn't mean to gloss over it, but because of my particular position in the company, I sit with all the leaders of all the different development groups and product groups and everything else. And I don't sit there and dictate what folks are going to do, but just kind of negotiate about what's coming and where can we start putting this in. And we have products in which it's maybe 50-50 split, that some of it's with the new architecture and some of it's legacy architecture. So it is kind of a long-range project just to get everything transitioned into this library. And then once we have everything transitioned to the library, then we can do things like, hey, what's the next skin for this going to be? But since everybody's on the same library, skinning it becomes a trivial effort in comparison to get everybody on the library to begin with.
Right. And actually, another question we've got here, talked a few times, especially when you're in the beginning stages of creating your design system, how did you guys try to strike that balance between making that design system satisfy project-specific needs versus needs of the company at scale?
Yep.
Was,
Yeah.
was there a tension there? And if so, how, how did you guys kind of work with that?
Yeah, another good question. Actually, what I'll do is I'll go back to our Glue library. And unfortunately, our blueprint section is coming soon. But what we did is one of these pieces, fonts, forms, headers, et cetera, those are ultimately elements, but the blueprints are what you actually do with the element. So if you look at these screen samples that you see here, you'll notice there's a lot of commonality, like the headers are all the same, right? But inside, like the grids are all the same, although you can only see one grid here. But the elements, the workflows, and those types of things can be unique to each product line. So therefore, they meet the unique set of requirements that a product would potentially have. The product that we sell to the insurance company is not the same product we sell to the bank, so it has some slight different variations of the workflows. So those fall into what we call the blueprint rather than visual parts. Oop, did we lose Jerry?
Nope, I'm here. Yeah. No, sorry, I think I was muted there briefly.
No, it's okay.
But yeah, that's.
Yeah, I was going to say I can certainly expand on that, but I also know we're running short on time.
Yeah, I think we'll wrap up with just maybe one or two more questions here, but there is a really interesting follow-up question, since you mentioned how Glue kind of plays with the legacy systems that you had in place, and one question was, kind of, did the reality of that end up with legacy products that were sort of a hybrid of old and new Glue components, or was the consistency pretty solid still?
Yeah, so what we did is there's, again, if you think about it from an end user perspective, they don't know what's going on underneath the covers, right? They don't know what technology is driving what. So what we did is we took a first pass at making a legacy product. We kept calling it "give a new coat of paint," right? So as you can see, all the headers of these samples that you see, there's what we refer to as the color bar, and then as you move your way up, there's the dark gray bar, and then there's the navigation sits on top. So from a coat of paint perspective, we just started putting that, whether it's legacy or new, onto our system. So at least what it did is it signaled to the end user and the companies we're selling to, hey, something's changing, right? Something's being updated. So even though the technology of the old menu may not have changed at all, we stylized it to make it look new. So then what that was that was kind of a point of attack. So if we did that way, if you jumped from a legacy page to a new page, it wasn't quite so jarring. You were seeing continuity between some of the aesthetic principles, even though the content area of a page, maybe the grids were different, or the form inputs were different, or something like that. Now that wasn't within a workflow. That would be like if you jump from workflow to workflow. So we did a dual approach where we did a coat of paint pass just to make things look a little bit more consistent. And then we started slowly picking off pieces of, okay, this is important. We're going to change this. We're going to leave that. So it did take some time. It's the way I always likened it is, it's kind of like watching a teenager grow, right? It's like one day their arms are too long, and one day their legs are too long, and after about a year, they start to look more right. So we certainly have had some products go through those stages. But the audience for these products, the fact that things were changing in a positive direction, that's what they liked.
Right. I think the last question that we'll cover here actually is related. There's been a few questions about the team structure to support Glue. So it'd be great if you could go into a little bit more detail around, if there's a dedicated team that supports Glue, or if that team structure has changed over time. So for instance, if you had a dedicated team in the beginning and now it's X percentage of everyone's time, and also just who are the people that kind of contribute and maintain this system at scale.
So what I'll do is I'll briefly touch on how the group is distributed throughout the company. So essentially every what we call strategic initiative has a dedicated group of UX folks on it. And that's designers and developers. So that way they live and breathe that product. So they don't jump around every 2 weeks or every 2 months or whatever. They're there for years, potentially. The people that run Paymode X have been there for 4 years on that product. They know it backwards and forwards. They're embedded into that group, which is another trust building exercise. From a product and development standpoint, it's, these guys aren't just flying in and flying out. It's like, no, they're here. So with that, if you can imagine, these different, all these different groups of folks embedded in everywhere else, then they have to think globally. So once a week, they roll up outside of the groups and they come together on some of these things. So from a structure perspective, they're bringing their knowledge and what their product needs are to the global front, and that's where kind of the thumb wrestling happens in terms of what's in, what's out. Specifically as to how the glue group is structured, it is all those people. So they have a full-time job, quote unquote, in their product. And then we run the whole system as an open source project. So essentially anybody can contribute and everybody gets from it. Now, that's all well and nice, but you do need that governance group to kind of watch out about, hey, people are just throwing junk into our system and we can't have that. So those people have volunteered to be part of the governance group. So they're not 100% dedicated to that. I could see us in probably the next 6 or 7 months either cycling people in and out to be full-time on it, or maybe even hiring some dedicated people for it. We've been, we're 2 years into it, and it's all been voluntary, but it's been kind of mandated voluntary, if you will. But it's because people saw it coming, and they have to do this design work anyway, so they're doing it in a way that others can benefit. But I can see over the next, within the next year, potentially rolling people off their products and kind of do a, like a month or two of service into the glue group where all they do is focus on that. We have a backlog. We have a bunch of things for glue in general. So to date, it's not been a dedicated team, but we potentially are moving to that, or at least some kind of rotational basis.
Gotcha. And with that being said, I think that's the last question that we'll answer here. We've got some fantastic questions, and if people would like to continue the discussion, I would invite them to apply to Product Tribes. And here is the URL for that. And if you have more than 3 years of experience in a product team, we encourage you to apply to the Slack group here where the conversation continues. We've got over 2,200 folks there. And the next session that we'll be running is actually a UX Pin product demo from one of our consultants here. So if you're curious to learn about UX Pin as a solution for the agile design process, then I would encourage you to join that session. If not, no worries. We have 2 more sessions from outside speakers later in the afternoon. Meanwhile, let me go ahead and drop in the link for the UX Pin Agile UX demo here. That's starting in about 15 minutes. Otherwise, Brian, thank you so much again for presenting this. Very detailed, and obviously you have a lot of great insights and experience in building such a robust design system, at such a large company. And to everybody who joined, thanks for joining us here again. And let me go ahead and put in the Slack URL again. And hope to see everybody in the afternoon sessions. And once more, if you are interested in learning about how UX Pin can improve your agile UX process, this is going to be very strictly a product demo. You can join us in about 15 minutes in the URL I just dropped there. Otherwise, hope to see everybody in the afternoon. And the sessions are recorded and they will be sent over next week in one consolidated email. So to the same email you registered with. Otherwise, yeah, great having everybody here. And Brian, fantastic job.
All right, thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks, guys. I will see you at the next session.